My sister-in-law stood up at my brother's anniversary party, with a glass of Prosecco in her hand, and told 40 people that I was the family disappointment who'd never amounted to anything. And the worst part wasn't even what she said. It was that my own mother laughed first. I want to take you back though, because this didn't start at that party. It started in a kitchen in Burlington, Ontario, when I was 12 years old and my mother sat my older brother Theo down at the table to go over his hockey schedule, while I stood in the doorway holding a report card with 4 A's on it that nobody asked to see. My name's Ren. I'm 31 now, and for most of my life, I was the quiet one, the one who did her homework without being told, who packed her own lunch from the time she was 9, because my mother was always at one of Theo's tournaments. My father, Hank, worked maintenance for the city of Burlington, good union job, decent pension eventually, but money was always stretched because between the equipment, the travel teams, the private skating coach twice a week, hockey ate everything. My mother, Carla, used to say Theo had a gift, and gifts needed to be nurtured. I used to wonder what you were supposed to call it when a kid got good grades and nobody nurtured that either. I'm not going to sit here and tell you my childhood was some gothic horror story. It wasn't. Nobody hit me. Nobody locked me in a closet. It was quieter than that, and honestly, quiet neglect is harder to point to, harder to explain to people. Because when you try to describe it out loud, it sounds like nothing. My mom went to all my brother's games and none of mine. Mine being the regional science fair twice, where I placed both times. It sounds small. It didn't feel small living inside it. Theo got drafted to a junior league team out in Sudbury, which in Canadian hockey terms is a pretty big deal. The kind of thing that makes a small-town family start dreaming about the NHL, even though statistically that almost never happens. My parents drove up to see him play more weekends than not. I stayed home with my grandmother, who I loved, but I remember turning 17 alone in the house, because everyone was 4 hours north. Watching Theo's team lose in the second round of some tournament, nobody outside Sudbury would ever think about again. By the time I was finishing high school, the math on university was already not working in my favor. I'd gotten into Western, in London, Ontario, for biology, with a partial entrance scholarship, but I still needed close to $16,000 a year after that for residence and the rest of tuition. I remember sitting at that same kitchen table, my dad doing the thing where he laced his fingers together before he said something hard, telling me that with everything going into Theo's hockey right now, registered education savings or not, they just didn't have the gap money for me. Maybe in a year, maybe I could do my first 2 years at Mohawk College and transfer the credits over. What I didn't find out until years later was that 3 months before that conversation, my parents had co-signed almost $38,000 in loans and fees for Theo's draft year, billet family contributions, summer training camp, an agent's retainer for a 16-year-old who hadn't played a single professional game. I went to Mohawk. I told myself it was temporary, the way you tell yourself a lot of things at 18. It wasn't temporary. 2 years turned into me just never transferring, because by then I had a part-time job at a property insurance brokerage downtown, and the manager there, a woman named Bridget, started giving me more responsibility than my job title technically called for. I was good at it. I liked untangling a messy file, finding the clause nobody else had read carefully. Bridget used to say I had an adjuster's brain, which she meant as the highest compliment a person in that office could give. The day I turned 19, I moved out. Not dramatically. I didn't slam a door or scream anything. I just signed a lease on a basement apartment in Hamilton with a guy I knew from college who needed a roommate, packed 2 suitcases and a laundry basket of stuff into my Honda Civic, and left. My mother asked if I was sure I could afford it. She didn't ask if I needed help. I called home every Sunday for the first year, out of habit more than anything. The calls always went the same way. She'd update me on Theo's season, his stats, whether some scout had been at his last game, and then ask, almost as an afterthought, how the insurance thing was going. After a while the calls became bi-weekly, then monthly, then mostly just texts around Christmas. I got my license as an insurance broker at 21. By 23 I was managing my own book of small commercial clients. Independent restaurants, a couple of dental practices, a landscaping company. For the brokerage, Bridget retired when I was 25, and instead of the firm hiring someone from outside, she told the owner she wanted me to take over her client list. I did. 2 years after that, I left and started my own brokerage, working out of a tiny office above a dry cleaner's on Lock Street with one assistant and a laptop that I'm pretty sure was held together with sheer stubbornness. I called it Birchcrest Risk Advisors. I kept it deliberately boring sounding. No flashy branding, nothing with my name on it, no LinkedIn posts tagging family. I'd watched what happened in my family when someone had something good. It got absorbed into Theo's story somehow. Or it got minimized. Or worst of all, it got used as leverage. My mother bringing up my little insurance company at dinners, like it was a hobby I'd eventually grow out of. The way you'd talk about a kid's lemonade stand. I decided a long time ago that the only way to build something that was actually mine was to build it where they couldn't see it. By the time I was 30, Birchcrest had 11 employees, and we were managing risk portfolios for over 200 commercial clients across the greater Hamilton and Burlington area. With annual revenue that had crossed 3 million Canadian dollars the year before, I'd bought a condo on the Hamilton waterfront with a view of the bay. I drove a car I'd paid cash for. I didn't owe anyone anything, and nobody in my family knew the real numbers, because every time it came up I just said it's going okay, and let them assume okay meant something modest. Here's the part that still gets me, every time I think about it. Theo never made it to the NHL. He played 3 years of junior, got passed over in the draft, bounced through a year of community college hockey in the Statesies, that didn't lead anywhere, and came home at 23 with a bad shoulder and no real plan. He ended up doing sales for a company that supplied parts to auto shops. Decent enough, nothing glamorous, but my mother talked about him like he'd narrowly missed becoming Connor McDavid. Instead of like a guy selling brake pads in the Niagara region. 2 years ago, Theo got engaged to a woman named Sabrina, and Sabrina's parents owned a small chain of rental properties around Oakville, a few duplexes, a low-rise building with maybe 20 units. They needed a brokerage to handle their commercial liability and property coverage. Somebody local, somebody they could trust with a fairly complicated portfolio. Sabrina asked Theo if he knew anyone, and Theo, who did not know what his own sister did for a living beyond something with insurance, went online and found a brokerage with good reviews 15 minutes from where he lived. He had no idea it was mine. Birchcrest's public listing only ever showed a general contact line and the name of my senior account manager, a sharp, careful man named Felix who handled most client-facing meetings, so I could stay in the background. We took the account. We restructured their coverage, found them almost $9,000 a year in savings by correcting an outdated valuation on one of the buildings, and within 6 months, Sabrina's parents were telling everyone they knew that Birchcrest was the best brokerage they'd ever worked with. At Thanksgiving last year, Theo mentioned at dinner that Sabrina's folks found this amazing little insurance company, and how impressed everybody was. My mother said, and I am quoting this almost exactly because Patricia, my dad's sister, my aunt, the only person in that family who's ever been straight with me, texted it to me word for word afterward. See, that's what happens when you surround yourself with sharp people. Theo's always had an eye for that. I found out about all of it through Aunt Patricia, who has made it something of a personal mission over the years to keep me informed of things my mother says when she thinks I'm not listening. Patricia is the one who called me the week before my parents' 40th anniversary party and said, "Ren, I need to tell you something. Your mother's been saying things about you. To people. About a breakdown." The breakdown story, as far as I could piece together, came from the fact that I'd ended a 4-year relationship with a man named Marcus the year before. Not dramatically, just a quiet, mutual unraveling. And somehow in the retelling at family gatherings, that became evidence that I was struggling, that the insurance thing was a lot of pressure for someone like Ren. Whatever that meant, I thanked Patricia. I told her I'd be fine, and I went to that anniversary party anyway, because 40 years is 40 years, because some stubborn, hopeful part of me still wanted to believe my family could surprise me. They did, just not the way I'd hoped. The party was at a banquet hall out near Bronte Harbor, the kind of venue that does both weddings and big anniversary parties, white tablecloths, a DJ in the corner, playing soft Michael Bublé covers, about 45 people including aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents' old neighbors from 3 houses ago. I wore a navy wrap dress I'd bought myself 2 years earlier for a client gala, simple, well-made, nothing flashy. My grandmother's garnet ring on my right hand, the one thing of hers I'd kept after she passed. My mother caught me near the gift table before dinner started. She looked at me the way you'd look at furniture you were deciding whether to reupholster or just replace. "You look tired," she said. "Is the business stressing you out? You can tell me, you know." I told her I was fine. Theo hugged me. Actually meant it, I think. He's never been cruel, my brother, just trained, the way a plant grows toward whichever window gets the most light, and nobody ever opened a second window for him to consider. Dinner went fine. Then the toast started. My uncle went first. A nice rambling speech about my parents' meeting at a church social in 1985. Then Theo, who got a little choked up talking about how hard his parents had worked to give him every opportunity, how grateful he was, how his hockey career might not have panned out, but they never gave up believing in him. And then Sabrina stood up, glass of Prosecco in hand, and said she just wanted to add something, since she was practically family now. She said it with a warm smile, the kind of smile that makes whatever comes next land harder. "I just have to say," Sabrina said, "Theo's family has been so welcoming, and it's made me think about how some kids just have that drive, you know? Like Theo. And some don't, and that's okay too." She looked right at me when she said it, and laughed lightly. No offense, Ren. We all love you. You're just still figuring things out, right? 45 and still single. Jumping between jobs. There's no shame in it. Some people just take longer to find their thing. I want to be clear. I was 31, not 45. And I'd had one job for the past 8 years that I'd built into a company employing 11 people, but apparently none of that had ever made it into the family narrative clearly enough to correct her. My mother laughed first. A real laugh. The kind you don't fake. A few people at our table laughed too. That nervous laugh people do when they're not totally sure if it was a joke. But they don't want to be the one not laughing. I sat very still. I counted, the way you do when you're trying not to do something you'll regret. And somewhere around 5 I realized I wasn't trying to calm down. I was just making sure my voice would come out steady. I stood up. I walked over to the little portable speaker setup the DJ had near the dance floor, and picked up the spare microphone sitting on his table. The room went quiet almost immediately, the way rooms do when something unscripted is about to happen. I'd like to say something too if that's all right, I said, and my voice didn't shake, which I remember being almost surprised by in the moment. Mom, Dad, happy anniversary. 40 years is genuinely something to be proud of, and I mean that. I looked at Theo. Congratulations on everything that's gone right for you this year too. Then I turned towards Sabrina, still smiling, the way you smile when you've decided something and there's no going back. I think there's been a bit of a mix-up, I said. The brokerage that's been handling your parents' rental portfolio, Birchcrest? That's mine. I founded it 8 years ago. We manage risk for over 200 commercial clients across this region, and last year we did just over $3 million in revenue. Nobody moved. I didn't go to Western for biology like I'd gotten into, I said, looking at my mother now, because there wasn't $16,000 a year for me. There was, though. It just went into Theo's draft year instead. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because I'm tired of being the cautionary tale in a story where I'm actually the one who turned out fine. I set the microphone back down on the DJ's table. Gently. The way you'd set down something you didn't want to break even though you absolutely could have thrown it. I picked up my coat from the back of my chair and walked out through the side doors into the parking lot. My heels the only sound on that polished floor. The whole hall behind me dead silent except, I swear, the DJ's playlist softly transitioning to the next Bousselet song, like nothing had happened. I sat in my car in that parking lot for a long time. I didn't cry. I just sat there breathing, the way you breathe after finally putting down something heavy you'd been carrying so long you'd forgotten it had weight. If you've ever been the family footnote, the one they describe as still figuring it out, while your bank statements quietly say otherwise, I see you. If you've ever sat at the far end of the table because somebody needed you to be smaller so they could feel bigger, I want you to know you're not imagining it. Tell me in the comments, has anyone in your family ever rewritten who you are in front of a room full of people, and what did you do? 2 days after the party, my phone rang. It was Aunt Patricia. She's telling everyone you had some kind of episode at the party. Patricia said, that the stress finally caught up with you and you made a scene. I wasn't surprised by that part. But then Patricia said something else. Something that made me sit down on the edge of my bed. Ren, there's something I should have told you a long time ago. When your grandmother passed, she left you something. A letter came from the lawyer's office. Your mother signed for it. My grandmother, my dad's mother, Eleanor, had died when I was 23. I'd been told, simply, that her small estate had been split evenly between her 2 children, my dad and his sister Patricia, and that there hadn't been anything specifically for the grandkids beyond that. Patricia told me Eleanor had actually left a separate fund of $28,000 specifically earmarked, in writing, for my education or professional certification, because Eleanor had always known I was the one who'd actually use it for something. My mother had signed for the correspondence on my father's behalf, told the estate lawyer that I'd declined the funds. I had never been contacted about declining anything, and redirected the disbursement into a joint account she and my father controlled. I called a lawyer that week, a careful, no-nonsense woman named Anjali, who'd handled some commercial contracts for Birchcrest before. It took her about a month and one sharply worded letter to recover $24,600. The original amount plus partial interest the estate lawyer's office had actually tracked, because thankfully they kept meticulous records, even if my mother hadn't covered her own tracks particularly well. I didn't take her to court. I genuinely thought about it, sat with the idea for a few weeks, even had an initial consultation about what that would look like. In the end, I decided I didn't need a judge to tell me I was right. I donated the full amount, all $24,600, to a bursary fund at Mohawk College for first-generation students transferring into university programs, named in my grandmother Eleanor's memory. About 2 months after the party, Theo called me. He'd found out everything by then. Sabrina's parents had pieced it together once Felix mentioned, in passing, who owned the brokerage, and word had obviously made its way back. Theo was quiet on the phone for a long stretch before he finally said, I didn't know, Ren. Any of it. The university money, none of it. I know you didn't, I told him. She's been. He stopped. I don't even know what to call what she's been doing. We talked for almost 2 hours that night, longer than we talked in years, maybe ever. He cried a little, which I'd genuinely never seen him do, not even after his draft year ended. He said he wanted to know me, actually know me, not the version of me that existed in our mother's stories. We're still figuring out what that looks like. It's careful and a little fragile. But it's real, and real is more than what we had before. My mother hasn't called me directly since the party. Through Theo, I've heard she's telling people the whole thing was staged, that I'd planned it to embarrass Sabrina, that I'd always been difficult about Theo's success. Maybe some people will believe her. That's not really mine to control anymore. Here's what I know instead. I spent over 2 decades quietly trying to correct a story about who I was, through grades and certifications, and a business built from nothing, hoping that eventually the achievement would just speak for itself and somebody would finally update the narrative. It didn't work that way. Sometimes the truth needs a microphone and a room that's already quiet. Birchcrest has 19 employees now. Last month we signed our largest contract yet, handling risk management for a new mixed-use development going up along the Hamilton waterfront, not far from my own building. My therapist, a calm, clear-eyed woman named Priya, once told me that grieving a parent who's still alive is one of the loneliest kinds of grief there is, because nobody brings you a casserole for it. She's right about that. I keep a small framed photo of my grandmother Eleanor on my desk at the office, hands folded in her lap in that picture, exactly the way my dad still folds his when he's nervous. I bring her daffodils when I visit, because she always said roses were too fussy for a prairie girl who'd moved east. I did it, Grandma. I kept going. Even when nobody up north was watching. I'm not angry anymore. Not in the way I used to be. Anger is heavy, and I'd already spent most of my life carrying weight that was never mine to begin with. What I have now instead is something quieter. Clarity about what I built, what I'm worth, and exactly how close I'm willing to let certain people stand to me. Boundaries were never about punishing anyone. They were just finally about remembering I mattered enough to protect. If you're watching this from a family that turned you into a footnote in someone else's story, you were never the footnote. You were always the whole chapter. They just weren't reading closely enough to notice.